I know you take good care of Meadow, Paul's daughter.
She takes good care of me. To see her with my...
Paul Walker's daughter stayed quiet for years, and not because she had nothing to say, but because some grief runs too deep for public processing, and some truths belong to the people who lived them before they belonged to anyone else. When Meadow Walker finally spoke about Vin Diesel, about the decade that followed her father's death, about what really moved between them in the years the cameras weren't watching, what she shared wasn't a scandal, and it wasn't a revelation designed for a headline cycle. It was something quieter and more difficult to dismiss than any rumor that had circulated about them. It was the specific, unglamorous shape of a family that formed under the worst possible circumstances, held together not by obligation or image management, but by a man who made a promise and kept it year after year without ever needing applause for it. Paul William Walker IV was born on September 12, 1973, in Glendale, California, the oldest child in a household that ran on Mormon faith, hard work, and the kind of loyalty that doesn't need to be spoken aloud to be understood. His father, Paul Walker III, had competed as a Golden Gloves boxer and worked as a sewer contractor, and his mother Cheryl had modeled while raising 5 children with a steady hand and strong convictions. Paul never set out to be famous. His mother entered him in diaper commercials at 2 years old because she thought he'd look good on camera, and she was right. But celebrity was never the destination for him. Small television roles followed through his childhood and adolescence, appearances on shows like Charles in Charge and Highway to Heaven, and he moved into film work in the 90s with parts in Varsity Blues and Pleasantville. None of it changed who he was at his core. What Paul actually wanted to do with his life was study the ocean. Jacques Cousteau was the figure he genuinely admired, and he backed that admiration with real study, completing marine biology coursework at community college and never losing that connection to the water throughout everything that followed. In 2006, he joined National Geographic on an active research expedition to tag great white sharks off the Mexican coast, which is something very few people with a Hollywood acting career were doing at that point in their lives. That's the detail about Paul Walker that doesn't fit the action hero image and tells you more about who he actually was than any of his films do. Cars were the other truthful part of him, and that wasn't performance either. His personal collection eventually grew to over 30 vehicles, including a Nissan Skyline GTR R34 that matched the car his character Brian O'Connor drove on screen, a detail that says something about how completely he inhabited that passion. He co-owned a performance shop called Always Evolving, where actual race cars got built, and he worked alongside the mechanics with his hands rather than standing nearby for photographs. The humanitarian side of his character showed itself most clearly after the Haiti earthquake in 2010, when he traveled there personally to help with relief efforts and came home determined to build something more permanent. The result was Reach Out Worldwide, a volunteer organization that dispatches skilled professionals, doctors, nurses, and rescue workers directly into disaster zones when conventional help moves too slowly. His brother Cody runs the organization now, and as of 2024, it has responded to over 70 major disasters on multiple continents. Paul never talked about this much publicly because the action was enough for him and the attention would have made him uncomfortable. His daughter, Meadow Walker, was born in 1998 and spent her early childhood in Hawaii with her mother, Rebecca Soteros, away from the industry and the noise surrounding her father's career. At 13, Meadow chose to move to California to live with Paul, and that decision reshaped both of their lives in ways neither of them had fully anticipated. Paul built his schedule around her presence, made breakfast for her in the mornings, and started reducing his workload so he could be genuinely available for the years ahead. He was actively stepping back from acting, not because the career had stalled, but because he had decided that Meadow was more important than any of it. That context makes November 30th, 2013, the day a car crash on a California road took his life, land with a particular kind of weight. Paul was 40 years old, Meadow had turned 15 that year, and the life he had been carefully building for them both ended that afternoon in a way that left nothing resolved. Vin Diesel had met Paul during the production of the first Fast and Furious film in 2000, and what grew between them across the following 13 years was a friendship both men treated with the seriousness of a blood bond. Vin's real name is Mark Sinclair, born July 18, 1967, in Alameda County, California, and his early life had already taught him that family is something you build from commitment rather than inherit from biology. His parents separated when he was young, and his mother moved him and his twin brother Paul to New York, where their stepfather Irving Vincent, a theater teacher, raised them as his own. Vin never met his biological father. That absence became a defining lens through which he understood loyalty, and it explains why his bond with Paul Walker ran as deep as it did. Vin gave Paul the nickname Pablo. When Vin found out his partner Paloma Jimenez was pregnant with their first child, Paul Walker was the first person he called, and when their youngest daughter arrived, Vin named her Pauline, because Paul had shown him what fatherhood looked like before Vin believed he was ready for it, simply by being unhurried and present with Meadow in a way that made the whole thing look possible. Vin's path to that friendship had run through real difficulty. At 7 years old, he broke into a New York theater with some friends, and instead of calling the police, the theater manager handed him a script and told him to rehearse. That accidental introduction to acting eventually led to nightclub work as a bouncer in his late teens, and that's where the name Vin Diesel formed around him. Vin pulled from Vincent, his stepfather's name, and Diesel from friends who said he ran on the energy of something that never stopped. Hollywood didn't open quickly for him, partly because his mixed heritage didn't slot cleanly into the categories casting directors relied on at the time, so he built his own opening by making a short film called Multifacial about an actor who couldn't get cast because no one knew where to put him. That film reached Steven Spielberg, who cast him in Saving Private Ryan, and the role of Dominic Toretto in 2001 turned him from a working actor into a cultural force. He and Paloma have built a private family life with 3 children, Hania, Vincent, and Pauline, kept deliberately away from the public exposure that comes with his level of fame. That instinct toward privacy was something he and Paul Walker shared completely, and it's part of what made their friendship genuine rather than circumstantial. After the crash, Vin moved quietly. He checked in on Meadow regularly, brought her into his own family's life so she could feel that kind of warmth again, and made himself available in the practical, undramatic way that grief actually requires from the people surrounding it. He called her his goddaughter, and he called that role a responsibility Paul had left him. Meadow was 15 when her father died, and 23 when she walked down the aisle at a private beach wedding in the Dominican Republic in 2021, marrying Louis Thornton Allen while Vin stood at her side in a light blue suit. His eldest daughter, Hania, served as chief bridesmaid, and that single detail captures the whole arc of what had developed between these two families in the years nobody was photographing them. Cody Walker has spoken since then about what Vin's consistent presence meant during those years, the specific weight of someone who stayed without ever being asked. The internet found this complicated, as it tends to find anything it can't easily categorize. When Meadow appeared briefly in Fast X in 2023 as a flight attendant, a scene that ran for a handful of seconds, some fans responded with genuine emotion, and others immediately started speculating about motives. Headlines suggested Vin had legally adopted her, though no official record of any adoption exists, and Meadow has kept the Walker name throughout her life. Others accused him of leveraging her image to generate sympathy for the franchise, turning a private family bond into a public marketing instrument. None of those accusations landed anywhere because none of them were supported by anything real. The cameo had been her own idea, a decision to stand briefly inside the world her father built, not to inherit his fame, but to honor him on a single afternoon in the only way that made sense to her. She posted a photo with Vin's children afterward and captioned it "Family Forever," then left the speculation to dissolve without her help. What Meadow has shared publicly, through personal posts and occasional interviews rather than any grand disclosure, is consistent and clear. Vin Diesel loved her father and moved that love into action the moment the cameras stopped. The Paul Walker Foundation, which Meadow launched on what would have been Paul's 42nd birthday, focuses on ocean conservation and support for young people, honoring the part of his character that the Fast and Furious franchise never fully captured. Vin supports the foundation and supports Meadow in ways that don't require announcements to mean something. Dwayne Johnson, despite his complicated history with the franchise, once described Paul as one of the most genuinely decent people he had encountered in the industry, and that quality wasn't constructed by the movies. It came with him, and it's what stayed after everything else ended. Paul's character, Brian O'Connor, was never written out of the Fast and Furious story. He lives on in that fictional world, still driving, still present at the family table, and in Fast X, a blue Nissan Skyline pulls into the driveway at the end of the film, the same model Paul collected and drove in real life, carrying the quiet message that some presences don't actually leave. Off-screen, Fuel Fest brings car culture together annually in Paul's name under Cody's direction, and Reach Out Worldwide keeps moving through disasters on multiple continents. Memorial drives happen in cities across Japan, Brazil, and South Africa, and murals of his face cover walls in neighborhoods where nobody would have recognized him on the street. None of this was manufactured by a studio. People who never met Paul Walker carry something genuine about his absence, because what he did away from the cameras was real enough to outlast the films entirely. Meadow Walker is building her own life now, on her own schedule and on her own terms. The loss she carried at 15 shaped her without consuming her, and the family she found in Vin Diesel's household filled something real without pretending to replace what she lost. The rumors ran out of material because the truth was straightforward all along. A man lost his closest friend, made a promise to that friend's daughter, and kept it without requiring recognition for the keeping. That's the story Meadow told when she finally told it, and it turns out that was the only story there ever was.